Valley Victoria Police, hands on top of your head right now, drop the bag.
What is this? I'm just doing the shopping with me, miss.
For over a decade, controlling partners like this one have counted on one thing, that no one in public will notice. What this 19-year-old cashier did in the next 7 minutes proved them completely wrong.
Hands on your head. Turn around and face the vehicle slow. We know about the knife in your pocket.
She's having a go at me. I never touched her. This is a misunderstanding.
All of it.
I want a...
It would all come down to a Kohl's receipt, folded once, eyeliner script across the back margin, 4 short sentences pressed in by a woman who had been held at knife point for most of the previous day. By the time Victoria Police walked Damien Mark Wexler out of that car park in Barwon, the receipt was already sealed in evidence. 11 years at Barwon Prison, a 7-year non-parole period, and it started with a 19-year-old cashier on a Tuesday afternoon shift who read 4 sentences, kept her face completely still, and ran a hostage rescue script in under 90 seconds while the man with the knife stood 3 feet behind his wife. Before we go any further, if you were the cashier in that lane, do you honestly think you would have caught it? 4 sentences in eyeliner, slid across a checkout belt in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon rush. Tell me in the comments. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel covers the cases where ordinary people did extraordinary things and the cases where the system almost let someone die. We post every single week. Damien Mark Wexler was born in 1991 in Sunshine, an outer west suburb of Melbourne. His father was a concrete cutter who worked for a small contracting firm in Footscray and drank at the Sunshine RSL every Friday after knockoff. His mother cleaned at a primary school in Albion. Damien was the middle of 3 boys. Neighbors from that period would later describe a household that was loud but not violent, the way they put it, meaning the yelling was constant and the bruises stayed under shirts. Damien's older brother left home at 16 and never came back. Damien stayed. He went to Sunshine College and was, by every account that ended up in his file, an unremarkable student. Teachers wrote that he was quiet, capable of the work when motivated, easily set off when corrected. He played footy for the under-15s at Sunshine Heights. He had a girlfriend in year 10 who broke up with him after he punched a hole through the plaster wall in her bedroom during an argument about a Facebook message. She told her mother. Her mother told Damien's mother. Damien's mother told Damien to apologize, and that was the end of it. At 17, he started a carpentry apprenticeship with a small residential builder out of Caroline Springs. The builder, a man named Trevor Halpin, told investigators years later that Damien was a good first year, showed up on time, listened, hit his marks. Halpin said he had no idea, and that is a phrase you will hear over and over again in this story. Everyone had no idea. Damien finished his apprenticeship at 21 and went out as a subcontractor doing frame and truss work for 2 of the big project builders in the Western Corridor. He bought a 2008 Hilux on finance. He moved out of his parents' house and into a share place in Sunshine West with 2 other tradies. He met Sarah Halloran in 2014. She was 20, working the front counter at a Bunnings in Sunshine. He came in for liquid nails, bought a hot dog from the sausage sizzle out the front, and asked for her number on the way back to his ute. She gave it to him. Friends who were there said Damien was charming in that early period. Not loud, not pushy, the kind of man who held doors and remembered the names of your housemates. Sarah's sister Bridget, 3 years older, told police later that she liked him at first. He was solid, she said. He had a trade. He had a ute. He showed up when he said he would. We didn't see it. They moved in together after 8 months. Sarah was pregnant with their daughter Olivia by the end of 2015. They married at a small registry ceremony in Werribee in March of 2016. There are photos from that day. Damien in a navy suit too tight in the shoulders, Sarah 7 months pregnant, in a cream dress her sister had altered for her. Both of them laughing at something off camera. Those photos would later sit in evidence files. Investigators flagged them as relevant for the context they provided about the relationship before it deteriorated. The first reported incident happened in 2017, 3 months after their son Toby was born. Sarah called her sister at 1 a.m. from the laundry of their unit in Hoppers Crossing. She was crying. She said Damien had thrown a coffee mug at the wall behind her head. She said it didn't hit her. She said she didn't want to call the police. Bridget drove over anyway. By the time Bridget arrived, Damien had gone to bed. Sarah had cleaned up the broken mug. She told Bridget she had overreacted. She told Bridget not to say anything. The pattern from 2017 to 2022 followed the shape that family violence investigators see again and again in these files. Isolation first. Damien did not like Sarah's friends from Bunnings. He did not like her seeing Bridget more than once a fortnight. He did not like her texting their old housemate. By 2019, she had stopped working. By 2020, she was driving a car he had bought with a tracker app he had installed, and she had stopped using social media. The second reported incident happened in 2021, when a neighbor in their townhouse complex in Werribee called Victoria Police after hearing screaming and a child crying for more than 20 minutes. 2 constables attended. Sarah told them everything was fine. She had a split lip. She said she had walked into a kitchen cabinet. The constables noted the injury, noted the inconsistency, asked Damien to step outside, and left a brochure for safe steps on the kitchen bench. No charges were laid. The brochure went into the bin. The intervention order came in March 2023. In Victoria, a family violence intervention order is the legal instrument the state uses to put distance between a person and someone they are accused of abusing. It is a civil order with criminal consequences. If the respondent breaches it by approaching, contacting, threatening, or returning to a shared residence, they can be charged with a criminal offense carrying up to 2 years imprisonment for each breach. The order against Damien was applied for by Sarah on the 8th of March, 2023, after an incident in which he held her against the kitchen wall by the throat for what she estimated to be 20 seconds, and then released her, walked out to his ute, and drove to the pub. She drove to the Werribee police station with both children in pajamas in the back seat at 9:15 in the evening. The application for an interim order was granted the same night. A final order was made by consent at the Werribee Magistrates Court 11 weeks later. The conditions were standard. Damien was not to approach Sarah. He was not to approach the children except through a supervised arrangement at a contact center in Footscray. He was not to be within 200 meters of her residence. He was not to contact her by phone, text, social media, email, or through a third party. The order was in force for 2 years. The system that issues that order is not a fortress. It is a piece of paper backed by the ability of police to respond when someone calls. It works when the respondent decides to comply, or when the respondent breaches it in a way that is loud and slow enough for police to arrive in time. It does not work reliably when the respondent has decided he will not comply and is prepared to act fast. Damien complied for the first 6 months. He moved into a rental in Sunshine North. He attended 1 mandatory men's behavior change session and stopped going. He met Sarah at the contact center on alternate Saturdays for 2 hours of supervised time with Olivia and Toby. He told the supervisor at the center, more than once, that the order was a misunderstanding and that he and Sarah were going to sort it out. The supervisor logged the comments. The logs went into a file that by November 2023 had grown to 43 pages. In late October 2023, Sarah moved with the children into her sister Bridget's house in a quiet cul-de-sac in Sunshine West. Bridget had a spare room. Bridget had a yard with a swing set. Bridget had 2 large staffies that barked at everyone who came up the drive. Sarah told her solicitor she felt safe there. She had not told Damien where she was living. She believed he did not know. He knew. On the morning of Monday, the 13th of November, 2023, Damien Wexler parked his Hilux 2 streets over from Bridget Halloran's house at 6:40 in the morning. He had been parked in that same spot, on and off, for 11 days. He had watched Sarah load the kids into Bridget's Camry at school drop time. He had watched her bring groceries in through the side gate. He had photographed the front door 3 times on his phone. At 9:15 that morning, Bridget left for her shift at a pathology clinic in Footscray. Sarah was alone in the house with Olivia, who was on a school holiday day, and Toby, who was 4. Damien walked up the side path. He used a key Sarah did not know he had, copied from a spare he had taken from her handbag 8 months earlier and never returned. He came in through the laundry door. What happened in the next 40 minutes was reconstructed later from the children's statements, from Sarah's testimony, and from a single ring camera across the street that captured Damien returning to his Hilux at 9:57 with Sarah walking ahead of him, his right hand in the pocket of his hoodie, her face white. Olivia and Toby were in the back of Bridget's Camry, still in the driveway, locked in. Damien had taken their phone tracking watches off both children and left them on the kitchen bench. He had also left Sarah's phone there, screen down, beside a half-drunk cup of tea. He drove Sarah out through the Western Freeway in the Hilux. He told her, in the cabin of the Ute, that he had a Stanley knife in his hoodie pocket and that if she opened the door, the kids would not have a mother by the end of the week. He drove for an hour and 40 minutes to a rental cabin in the bush outside Ballon, a property he had booked online the previous Thursday under a friend's name. The cabin was a 1-room weatherboard with a wood heater and a single bed, set on 5 acres of bracken and stringy bark. There was no neighbor within 400 meters. There was no mobile reception inside the cabin itself. There was reception, intermittently, on the back veranda and at the gate. What happened in that cabin over the next 28 hours is documented in Sarah's victim impact statement, which was read in full at sentencing. The summary version, which is what we will stay with, is that Damien alternated between calm conversation about reconciliation and explicit threats with the knife in his hand. He did not let her sleep. He took her phone, which he had retrieved from his Ute. He used her phone to message Bridget at 4 in the afternoon. Had a migraine, took the kids to the park, will be back by dinner, and again at 7. Kids fell asleep at Mum's, staying over, talk tomorrow. Bridget, who had come home to an empty house and 2 children gone, had already called the police. She knew the messages were not from her sister. The phrasing was wrong. Sarah did not say Mum's. Sarah's mother had died in 2019. By Tuesday morning, Sarah had been in the cabin for nearly 24 hours. Damien had not eaten. He had drunk most of a bottle of Bundaberg rum he had brought with him. He told Sarah they were running low on supplies and that they were going to drive into town. He told her she was going to behave normally. He told her he would have the knife in his pocket and that if she said anything at all, he would put it in her ribs in the car park and run for the bush. Sarah believed him. She had been married to him for 7 years, and she knew the difference between a threat he would not carry out and a threat he would. She also knew she had 30 seconds, somewhere, between his eyes leaving her and his eyes coming back. And she knew that wherever they were going, there was going to be a person behind a counter. The Coles supermarket in Barwon sits at the end of the main street, between a Mitre 10 and a fish and chip shop. The car park is sealed asphalt with about 40 bays. On a Tuesday afternoon in mid-November, at 2:15, it is busy without being chaotic. Retirees, school holiday families, tradies on a late lunch. Damien parked the Hilux in a bay near the trolley return. He walked Sarah inside with his right hand on the small of her back. In the cosmetics aisle, while Damien was looking at a row of disposable razors 3 meters away, Sarah picked up a Maybelline eyeliner pencil from the shelf, palmed it, and slipped it into the cuff of her jumper. From an earlier Coles run, he had taken her on the day before for cigarettes and Powerade. She still had a folded receipt in the front pocket of her jeans. He had not searched her pockets in 19 hours. He had stopped paying attention to that level of detail. In the bread aisle, with him 3 steps behind her, looking at the price of a 6-pack of crumpets, she pulled the receipt out, pressed it flat against her thigh with one hand inside her jumper, and wrote 4 sentences in eyeliner against her own leg. He has a knife. I have 2 kids at home. Please call police. Don't react. She folded the receipt back into quarters and palmed it. At the self-checkout, she scanned 3 items and then said, loudly enough for Damien to hear, that the machine was not reading the barcode on the bread. She caught the eye of the staffed lane operator, a young woman in the red Coles polo, and walked her trolley across. Damien followed. He stood at her right shoulder, close enough that their forearms touched. He had his right hand in his hoodie pocket. The cashier was 19 years old. Her name was Eleanor Marston. She had been working at that Coles for 14 months. She was halfway through a Certificate 3 in Community Services at Federation TAFE, and she had done 1 online module 6 weeks earlier on recognizing signs of family violence in customer-facing roles. The module had taken her 40 minutes, and she had passed it with a screenshot she had saved on her phone for her records. She had thought, at the time, that the module was mostly common sense. Sarah set her items on the belt: a loaf of Tip-Top White, a 4-pack of 2-minute noodles, a bottle of Powerade, a tin of Spam. As she set the Spam down, she slid the folded receipt across the belt to the right of the scanner, into Ellie's hand, and mouthed 2 words. Please read. Eleanor Marston has been interviewed about the next 90 seconds by police, by Coles's internal review team, by a journalist from the Herald Sun, and by the prosecutor at sentencing. Her account has not changed across any of them. She said she opened the receipt with one hand below the level of the belt, while her other hand scanned the loaf of bread. She read it once. She read it again. She kept her face, in her words, exactly the way it had been a second before. She picked up the Powerade and scanned it. She picked up the Spam and scanned it. She looked up at Damien and smiled the small, tired smile that 19-year-old supermarket cashiers smile at every customer in a regional town on a Tuesday afternoon, and she said, "Sorry, mate, your card's been declined. I'm just going to have to grab my supervisor. Won't be a sec." There was no card. Sarah had not yet taken a card out. Damien did not say anything. He looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at the belt. Ellie reached under the counter with her left hand and pressed the silent duress button beneath the till. The button is a small, recessed plastic disc connected to a direct line to a Coles security monitoring center, which is connected, when triggered, to the nearest Victoria police station. The Barwon police station is 240 meters from the Coles car park. She walked, not fast, across to the customer service counter and spoke to the duty manager, a woman named Karen Petrides. She said quietly, "Karen, the lane 2 customer? The woman. She's just handed me a note. He's got a knife, 2 kids at home. She wants the police. The duress is already pressed." Karen Petrides looked at her once, walked back to lane 2, and told Damien in the same flat tone that the EFT POS terminal was playing up across the whole front end, and that they were going to need a couple of minutes to sort it. She offered him a complimentary coffee from the in-store cafe. He declined. He stayed at the lane. His hand stayed in his pocket. The first marked unit from Barwon Station rolled into the car park 4 minutes and 30 seconds after the duress alarm. 2 more units from Bacchus Marsh arrived within the next 3. By the time the responding sergeant, Cameron Pike, walked through the Coles front door at the 7-minute mark, there were 6 officers in or around the building and 2 more covering the rear loading dock. I want you to think about what Ellie did in that minute and a half. 19 years old, reading 4 sentences in eyeliner on the back of a receipt, keeping her face completely still while the man who wrote them stood at her customer's elbow. If you think stories like this deserve more attention than they get, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and consider subscribing. We cover cases where the system worked because one person decided it had to. Sergeant Pike's approach to the lane was the kind of approach that family violence first responders train for and rarely get a chance to use cleanly. He came in through the front entrance with 1 constable. 2 more officers were already positioned at the end of the cosmetics aisle, out of Damien's eye line, in plain clothes. Pike walked toward lane 2 as if he were a customer, then redirected at the last second and stepped between Damien and Sarah. He said, calmly, "Mate, can I have a quick word out the front?" Damien's right hand stayed in his pocket. He said, "About what?" Pike said, "Just need a quick word." Sarah did not look at her husband. She looked at the conveyor belt. The constable behind Pike took a half step to Damien's right side and placed a hand on his forearm at the elbow, the way you do when you do not want a person to draw something out of a pocket. The 2 plainclothes officers from the cosmetics aisle closed in from behind. Damien's whole body went still. He said, "What's this about?" Pike said, "It's about your wife." Damien said, "I don't know what she's told you." Pike said, "She hasn't told us anything." The cashier did. What followed was over in under 20 seconds. The constable to Damien's right rotated his forearm out of the hoodie pocket and pinned the wrist. The 2 plainclothes officers took the left side. Pike removed the Stanley knife from the front pocket of the hoodie, blade extended, locked, and bagged it in front of 3 witnesses. Damien was walked, not dragged, out the front sliding doors and into the car park. He was placed on the ground beside an unmarked Commodore. He did not resist. He did not speak. The body cam footage that opens this video is from a constable's chest cam, recorded as Damien was being lifted from the asphalt and walked to the back of the divisional van. The look on his face in those seconds is the look of a man who has just understood, in real time, that a 19-year-old he never looked at twice had ended his life. Sarah was walked by a female constable through a back office and out a side door, where a paramedic crew was already waiting. She did not cry until she saw the police uniform. Then she sat down on the curb, and she cried for a long time. Inside the store, Sergeant Pike asked Eleanor Marston if he could see the note. She handed it to him. He read it. He photographed it on his phone, then on his issued device, and then he sealed it in an evidence bag and labeled it as Exhibit 1. He told her, before he left, that she had just done the single most competent thing he had seen a member of the public do in 19 years of policing. She said, "I just did the module." Damian Mark Wexler was charged on the same night with kidnapping, false imprisonment, threat to kill, possession of a controlled weapon with intent to commit an indictable offense, and breach of a family violence intervention order. He was remanded in custody. Bail was refused twice. He spent 14 months on remand at the Melbourne Assessment Prison before his matter was listed for plea. In January 2025, he pleaded guilty to all charges before Justice Helen McAllister in the Supreme Court of Victoria. The plea hearing ran for 2 days. Sarah's victim impact statement, read by her sister Bridget because Sarah could not read it herself, ran for 19 pages. It described the 31 hours. It described the 7 years before the 31 hours. It described what it is like now to stand in the cosmetics aisle of a supermarket and feel her hands shake. It also described Eleanor Marston. Sarah said, in her statement, that she had thought, in the queue at the lane, that there was a strong chance the cashier would simply hand the receipt back to her and ask if she had dropped it. She said she had written the note knowing that. She said she had decided that a strong chance of nothing was still better than the certainty of going back to the cabin. She said when the cashier smiled and said the card had been declined, she understood that she was going to live. Justice McAllister, in her sentencing remarks, addressed Damian directly for the first 11 minutes. She spoke about the intervention order and what it meant that he had treated it as a piece of paper. She spoke about the children who had been locked in the back of a Camry for 50 minutes before their aunt came home. She spoke about the cabin and the rum and the knife. She said, near the end, that what distinguished this case from the long catalog of similar cases that came through her court was that, on a Tuesday afternoon in November, a teenager at a checkout in Barwon had decided to be alert, and that the law was now able to do what it was supposed to do because of that decision. She said it was, in her view, important that the public record reflect that. She sentenced him to 11 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 7 years. He was transferred from the Melbourne Assessment Prison to HM Prison Barwon, a maximum security facility outside Lara, where he is currently housed in a mainstream unit. His earliest eligibility for parole is January of 2032. Sarah and her children moved interstate in the months following the plea. Bridget moved with them. The Sunshine West house was sold. The rental cabin outside Ballon was, briefly, the subject of a true crime tour bus operation that was shut down by Moorabool Shire Council after local complaints. Eleanor Marston finished her Certificate 3 in Community Services in mid-2024. She works today at a family violence response service in regional Victoria. She has been asked several times to speak at training sessions for retail workers about what she did at Lane 2 of the Ballon Coles. She has accepted twice. She tells the same story both times. She says she did the module. She says it took her 40 minutes. She says she nearly didn't bother. The receipt is in the Victoria Police Evidence Archive. The eyeliner has faded, slightly, in the 18 months since it was logged. The 4 sentences are still legible. This case was something else. But the case on the right-hand side of your screen right now is the one I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Click it. You'll see why.